"Why
Seen
won't
by
you look
her.
at me?" she asked. He replied, "I'm a poor single dad." January 2 in the morning, and the cold had teeth. Chicago in winter wasn't a city that apologized for itself. It pressed down on you, stripped you bare, reminded you exactly how small you were against all those glass towers and frozen wind corridors that seemed to go on forever. The kind of cold that made you think about where you were and why you were there, and whether any of it was worth the shaking in your hands. Marcus Chen was 41 years old, and he'd been lying underneath an HVAC duct on the 42nd floor of Helios Capital for the last 3 years. 3 years of arriving before dawn. 3 years of leaving after dark. 3 years of learning how to move through a building like he wasn't really there, like he was part of the infrastructure, like he was something to be built into the walls and forgotten about immediately after. He'd gotten good at it. Invisibility. That was the word he used in his own head. Not hiding exactly. Invisibility. Because hiding meant you were running from something, meant you were afraid. And Marcus Chen wasn't afraid. He was careful. There was a difference. His uniform was slate gray, the same color as the ductwork. He wore it like a second skin. His shoulders were broad from years of physical work. His face had settled into something quiet, not unfriendly. People sometimes mistook it for unfriendly, but contained, like a house with all the curtains drawn, everything going on inside, and nothing leaking out. The building was empty except for him. The trading floor was silent. Usually, it was a pressure cooker of voices. Chairs rolling, keyboards clicking, deals being made, money moving around, people talking over each other. But at 2 in the morning, it was just the groan of the building settling in the wind and the mechanical exhale of the HVAC system that he was currently lying underneath. The secondary return duct on the east side had been pulling warm air instead of circulating it. Small problem. Invisible problem. The kind of problem nobody noticed until the thermostat crept up 2 degrees and someone in a $7,000 suit got uncomfortable. That was his job. Finding the invisible problems before anyone had to notice them. Before they escalated. Before they became someone else's emergency. He worked with the slow, deliberate economy of someone who had learned that rushing things cost more than time. He understood the philosophy. His own father had been a plumber. Not a great father. Not there much. But when he was working on a pipe, he treated it like it deserved his full attention. Like it mattered. Like the person who would eventually use that pipe had a right to something done right. Marcus had inherited that. Not the plumbing. The philosophy. Things broke. You fixed them. You did it right. Or you did it again. You didn't give up, and you didn't accept less than whole. He was deep in the ductwork adjusting the damper actuator when he heard the sound. Heels on tile. Purposeful. Slightly impatient. The kind of sound that belonged to someone who moved through space, like it had been arranged specifically for them. Which at Helios Capital, it largely had been. He kept working. Didn't look up. His hands stayed steady, even though something in his chest tightened. He knew who it was before she said anything, before she even got close. Some part of him always knew when she was near. Victoria Ashford, 44 years old, CEO and co-founder of Helios Capital. The Ashford in the company name. She had the kind of face that made you want to study it. Strong jaw. Dark eyes that seemed to be running calculations even when she was supposed to be relaxing. Dark hair pulled back with the efficiency of someone who had stopped caring about how it looked, and somehow that had made it look better. She wore her authority like armor that she'd had so long she forgot it was there. She stopped about 12 feet away. He felt the change in the room, the way you feel a pressure shift, a slight change in air. An awareness that something was different. "Why won't you look at me?" she asked. The question landed in the quiet room and sat there, just sat there, waiting for an answer he wasn't sure how to give. Marcus kept working. He kept his eyes on the ductwork. He kept his hands moving. After a long moment, he said the thing he always said. Just focused on the work, ma'am. You've been on this floor dozens of times. She didn't accept it. That's not what I asked. He pulled himself out from under the duct and sat up, not quite standing, just sitting there on the cold floor in his gray uniform in the middle of the night. He looked at the floor beside her feet. Her shoes were expensive, the kind that cost more than his rent, worth more than his entire outfit probably, worth more than his car. I'm just the maintenance tech, he said carefully. Professional distance and all that. My name is Victoria. She interrupted. And boundaries require you to actually see someone to maintain distance from them. You haven't even allowed yourself to see me. I've noticed everything about you. Where are you from? Why you work nights? Why you look like you're carrying something too heavy for anyone to carry alone. He stood up then, because staying on the floor felt suddenly wrong. Dangerous even. He redirected his gaze to the middle distance, the glass wall beyond her. The snowstorm pressing itself against the city. The orange-white glow of Chicago at night. Everything that wasn't her face. She waited. He could feel her looking at him. The way you feel a hand near a flame. The heat of being noticed. The danger of being seen. I can't, he said, and he meant it. She left after that. He heard her heels move away. The sound fading. The silence returning. He sat there for a long time and thought about all the ways he had made himself small, all the routes through the building he'd memorized to avoid the corridors where she might be, all the systems he'd worked on at night, specifically, so he wouldn't have to see her during the day. 3 years. She had watched him for 3 years. The next 3 days were difficult. Marcus couldn't focus. He kept replaying the conversation. He kept noticing things about her he'd been actively avoiding noticing. The way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes, the fact that she'd been watching him, that she had questions about him, that she'd cared enough to ask them. He tried to reinstall invisibility, took jobs that kept him away from the upper floors, rerouted around spaces where she might appear. But it didn't work the same way anymore. The system was compromised. His own daughter could tell something was wrong. Sophie was 5 years old, and she could see right through him. She asked him one evening when he came home, "Why are you scared?" Not scared about what, just scared. Kids know. They understand their parents better than anyone else in the world. He couldn't explain to her, so he held her. He held her and promised everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. Everything had changed the moment Victoria Ashford decided to ask him why he wouldn't look at her. Margaret Holt from 3B noticed it too. She was 70 years old, a retired school teacher. She'd been watching Sophie on his late shifts for 3 years now, sitting in his apartment with her mystery novels and her herbal tea, asking for nothing except the occasional jar of the pasta sauce he made on Sundays. She'd learned patience from 40 years of teaching children. She didn't ask him direct questions. Instead, she made him tea and sat with him. She created space for him to speak. "I've watched you hide Marcus," she said finally. "I've watched you make yourself smaller and smaller. And Sophie is watching. She's learning from you that this is how you survive. That being loved means disappearing." The words hit him hard because they were true. He didn't want Sophie to learn invisibility. He wanted her to believe the world was good, that people could be trusted, that love didn't mean abandonment. But how could he teach her that while living the opposite lesson? That night, he sat in Sophie's room. She was sleeping. Her small hand was outside the blanket, reaching for something, and he realized. His daughter was reaching for something, and her father was teaching her not to reach. He went to the kitchen and pulled out the file, the Sterling Holdings account. Victoria had slipped it to him at some point. He opened it and started reading. All the notes from previous account managers, all the feedback from David Finch, the client they couldn't keep, the account that was failing, and he saw what was actually wrong. The problem wasn't the strategy. The problem was that everyone had been trying to give Finch what he wanted instead of telling him what he actually needed. No one had been willing to be honest. Everyone had been playing politics. Everyone had been trying to manage the situation instead of solving it. Marcus worked through the night. He made notes. He built a strategy. Not what Finch wanted, what Finch needed. And he based it on what he understood about broken things. You don't fix them by ignoring what's wrong. You fix them by seeing the problem clearly and addressing it directly. By 4 in the morning, he had a proposal. It wasn't polished. It was direct. It was honest. It was exactly what he would do if he were fixing a system instead of managing an account. He stopped and looked at Sophie's bedroom door. He thought about what would happen if he submitted this. If he did this, he wasn't invisible anymore. If he did this, something would change. Everything would change. He couldn't take this job and stay who he was. And then he thought something else. Maybe who I am is someone who fixes broken things. Maybe my daughter needs to see that. He finished the proposal. He formatted it carefully. He submitted it before he could change his mind. Friday morning, he dressed differently. Not the gray uniform, a button-down shirt, real shoes. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. For the last 3 years, he had hidden in plain sight. Now he was choosing to be visible. And he knew that once he made this choice, he couldn't take it back. The presentation lasted 45 minutes. No slides. Just him talking directly to David Finch about the real problems. The conflicting feedback. The lack of clear direction. The fact that Finch's own team didn't trust the strategy because Finch kept changing it. Finch was uncomfortable. Nobody had ever talked to him like this. They'd always told him he was right, or managed his expectations, or worked around his indecision. Nobody had said, your leadership is inconsistent, and you don't have the courage to commit to a direction. But Marcus didn't say it mean. He said it like a man who saw what was broken and wanted to help fix it. I see what's wrong. I can help you fix it, if you're willing to face it. Finch asked hard questions. Marcus answered them directly. No posturing. No trying to sell something. Just honesty. When can you start? Finch finally asked. That evening, Marcus called the school and asked if he could pick Sophie up early. He got her from Margaret and took her to the park. Just the two of them. He pushed her on the swings, and she laughed. And he thought about what he was doing this for. This sound, this moment. This daughter who was allowed to reach for things because her father was showing her it was safe to want something. Sophie asked him, did something good happen? You look different. Happy different. Not worried different. He said I did something scary today, and I survived it. And now I know that I can do scary things if they matter enough. Sophie considered this seriously. She said, did it matter for me? He said, yes, everything matters because of you. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus had a new position. Account manager, new desk, new visibility. The work was demanding, but he was good at it in a way that surprised him. He didn't have to pretend. He just had to see what was broken and fix it. Victoria found reasons to check in with him, professional reasons on the surface. But they both knew it was more. She wanted to know him. He wanted to be known. She invited him to dinner. Not a date exactly, professional dinner, but in a restaurant with low light and cloth napkins and wine that cost more than his rent. During dinner, she asked about Sophie's mother. Not casual. She was building context. She wanted the story. Depression, he said. Postpartum. She left when Sophie was 8 months old. Just left. No goodbye. No explanation beyond a note that said she couldn't do it. Couldn't be the person Sophie needed. Couldn't stay. Did that break you? Victoria asked. It broke me completely, he said. And then I realized I had another person depending on me who wasn't going anywhere. So I had to decide. Stay broken, or put myself back together enough to be her father. Victoria shared her own story then. Born to money, but no warmth. Parents who loved the idea of her, but not the person. Relationships that all ended the same way, when she stopped being useful. I think we're both people who have learned that asking for things is dangerous, she said. And we're both scared to change that, he said. Victoria reached across the table. A small gesture, her hand near his. She said, I think it's time we did. I think it's time we risked being what we actually are with each other. Marcus panicked. This was the moment he'd been avoiding. This was the moment where wanting something for himself became impossible to deny if he wanted Victoria. That meant distributing his attention. That meant splitting his commitment to Sophie. That meant risking everything. I'm not good at this, he said. I'm not good at having things outside of Sophie. I'm not good at wanting something that could go away. Victoria said nobody's good at that, but some people are brave enough to do it anyway. Over the next 2 months, they moved slowly and carefully. Friday dinners became Wednesday dinners, became Saturday brunches. Victoria started meeting Sophie, but carefully. Marcus was still terrified of what happened if Sophie got attached and then lost another person. The first time Victoria met Sophie was at the park. Sophie brought her favorite stuffed animal, Gerald the elephant. She was doing research. She was going to decide if this woman was safe. Victoria showed up with a yellow kite, Sophie's color. Not by accident, by design. She'd done her homework. She knew Sophie loved yellow because Marcus had talked about his daughter constantly at work. They flew the kite, Sophie and Victoria. Marcus watched from a distance, his entire body tense with anticipation and fear. Sophie asked, Are you going to stay? Victoria crouched to Sophie's eye level. I would like to, if that's okay with you. Sophie considered. She held Gerald up. Gerald has to agree too. Victoria took Gerald seriously. She asked him what he thought. She listened to Sophie's answer about what Gerald supposedly said. And in that moment, Marcus realized, this woman is going to love my daughter the way I love her. Over the following months, Victoria became a regular part of their lives. Not intrusive, just present. She came to Sophie's school events. She helped with homework. She taught Sophie about elephants because that became their thing. Sophie started drawing. She drew Victoria and Marcus together. She drew the three of them as a family unit. She was building something in her imagination, and then building it in reality. Margaret noticed the change. She said, You're happy, actually happy, not just surviving. Marcus said, I'm terrified. Every day, I'm terrified that something will go wrong. Margaret said, Of course you are. That's what love is. It's the terror of having something you could lose and choosing to keep showing up anyway. The apartment on South Paulina was too small for 3 people. Victoria mentioned this gently. She had more space, a place where Sophie could have her own room, a place where they could all fit. Marcus was afraid to leave the apartment. He'd built it. He'd fixed it. It was his proof that he could provide. But Sophie said something that changed everything. I like the apartment, she said, but I would like a bigger room. I would like to have space to grow. So they moved into Victoria's apartment, a place with light, with air, with actual room for a life bigger than survival. On the first night, Sophie slept in her new room, painted the colors she'd chosen, and Marcus and Victoria stood in the hallway watching her sleep. And Marcus thought, this is what visibility looks like. This is what it means to stop hiding. December morning, and Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee. Victoria came in from her bedroom and asked him something that stopped him completely. She said, Marry me. Not a question, a statement. She'd been thinking about this for months. Marcus said, Why? Victoria said, Because I love you. Because I love Sophie. Because I've spent my entire life building things alone. And I finally want to build something with someone. Because I see you completely. And I'm not going anywhere. Marcus was afraid. This was the ultimate commitment. This was the ultimate rejection of invisibility. This was legal and binding and public. He said, if something goes wrong. Victoria said, then we fix it. Like you fix broken things. We see what's wrong and we fix it. We don't run. We don't hide. We face it. Sophie came into the kitchen. She saw something was happening. Victoria looked at Marcus. She said, I want to ask you with your daughter here. Because this isn't just about us. Marcus looked at Sophie. She nodded. He said yes. December 15th. And the wedding was small. 26 people. The people who actually mattered. Marcus wore a suit. For the first time in his life, He wasn't hiding in uniform. He was visible. This mattered to him. He stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized the man looking back. Sophie wore a dress she picked out. Not white, but pale yellow. She wasn't giving things up for this wedding. She was bringing the best of herself to it. She brought Gerald in Marcus's jacket pocket. Gerald was an official member of this family. Margaret sat in the front row in her best blue dress and cried quietly and happily. She cried because she'd watched Marcus go from invisible to visible, from broken to whole, from teaching his daughter that love is dangerous to teaching her that love is brave. They had vows, real vows, not written in some fancy way, but written by the three of them together, a family making promises to each other. Marcus said, "I learned to hide because I was afraid. I learned to be invisible because I thought that was the only way to protect my daughter. But you showed me that the greatest gift I can give her is to show her that love is possible. That connection is possible. That visibility doesn't destroy you. It saves you." Victoria said, "I learned to be strong because I thought strength meant not needing anyone. But you showed me that real strength is the courage to let someone see you and love you anyway. I choose this. I choose you. I choose Sophie. I choose to build this life with intention." Sophie said, "I was scared my daddy was sad, but now I know he was just scared, and now he's not scared anymore. And Gerald is very happy." When they kissed, the entire room felt the weight of what they'd overcome. This wasn't just a wedding. This was a transformation. After the wedding, at the reception, Marcus stood with a drink in his hand and watched his daughter dance with Victoria. He thought about that night on the 42nd floor. When Victoria asked, "Why won't you look at me?" He thought about all the ways that question broke open his entire life. He thought about every moment of terror and every moment of joy, and how they were both necessary. He thought, "I looked. I finally looked, and she was still there. She stayed. Both of them stayed." 1 year later, Marcus and Victoria and Sophie had built a life that was bigger than any of them imagined. Marcus no longer worked in maintenance. He worked in account management. He was visible in a way that used to terrify him. People knew his name. People asked his opinion. People valued his insight. Victoria's company had changed under her guidance. More family-friendly policies, better wages, a culture that valued people instead of just productivity. She'd learned from Marcus that leadership isn't about control. It's about seeing people clearly and bringing out their best. Sophie was in first grade. She drew constantly. Her drawings were no longer about her father hiding. They were about her family in color, in light, in rooms that weren't gray, but yellow and blue and gold. On a snowy December night, exactly 1 year after the wedding, Marcus woke to snowfall. The same kind of snow that had brought Victoria onto his floor years ago. He looked at Victoria sleeping beside him. He thought about the question, "Why won't you look at me?" He'd been looking ever since. He'd been looking at Victoria. He'd been looking at Sophie. He'd been looking at his own life and realizing that visibility was not dangerous. Hiding was what was dangerous. Hiding was what cut you off from everything that mattered. He didn't wake Victoria. He just watched her sleep and felt grateful in a way that was almost too large to contain. He thought, "I spent years learning to disappear. It took one woman asking one question to teach me how to reappear, to teach me that the most important thing you can do is show up, be visible, be present, be willing to be known." He thought about Sophie. He thought about what he was teaching her, that it was safe to reach for things. That connection was possible. That love was not something to hide from, but something to move toward. He went back to bed and held Victoria and slept the sleep of a man who was no longer running. Outside, the snow kept falling quiet and purposeful, accumulating on ledges and window frames, wrapping the city in something white and still. And inside the apartment, that was full of light and air and room for 3 people to live and breathe and grow together, Marcus Chen was finally home, finally visible, finally at peace.